In a very short period of time, Valorant has risen to become one of the most played games on the planet, with over 5 million players logging in every single day. It was the most ambitious title by Riot Games after their huge success with the global phenomenon League of Legends, and just like its older sibling, Valorant is also a free-to-play title, and it ticks all of the boxes an average gamer looks for in an FPS game. Great movement, fun characters, good gunplay, most of the time at least, and plenty of cosmetics are some of them. However, players also sign up for something much worse involuntarily, and that is toxicity. It is no secret that almost all of today's online games, especially competitive ones, contain some form of toxicity. Especially if the game is all about teamwork or cooperation, there is a high chance that other players could be complaining about your lack of skill or blame you for their own decisions or many other reasons. And it is no different in Valorant. In fact, the game has grown into becoming one of the most toxic games of the current generation. Let's dig deeper into how and why Valorant has become the cesspool of toxicity. Before getting onto Valorant's toxicity, let's take a quick glance at its older sibling, League of Legends. If you take a random group of gamers and ask what the most toxic game is, there is a high chance that the majority will say League. The game has an extremely toxic player base, and you'd come across a toxic player once every couple of matches if you don't turn on the built-in anti-toxicity features. Fortunately, there are chat filters and features to avoid this toxicity to some extent in League, but what good is it playing a cooperative game without being able to communicate with your team? Coming back to Val, the fresher Riot title has also started heading in the same direction as League, towards an extremely toxic environment. Arguably, Valorant could get even worse than League because not only does Valorant feature a text chat feature, it also has voice comms. But it is also worth mentioning that the game was not like this when it was first released or when many of us played it in beta. Valorant had a very exclusive beta launch back in the day, limited to a few regions and a few players. The game was one of the most watched games on the internet back then, but not everyone had access to play it. So the player base was actually pretty mellow and had almost little to no toxic players whatsoever. Even after the game's release, the player base was uncontaminated from extreme toxicity for quite some time. However, as time passed, the game became more established, and as the player base grew, Valorant took a turn for the worse. The saddest part here is that Riot themselves were actively trying to make their games less toxic, and they definitely are honestly not the ones to blame here. So what exactly went wrong? Toxicity in competitive gaming has unfortunately become quite the norm today. Wherever you go, MOBA, FPS, or even simple fun kids games sometimes, they are all infected with some sort of toxicity. It doesn't always need to be toxic messages or comms, but toxicity also comes in other forms such as griefing and other negative attitude. And there are a handful of main causes or driving factors for such behavior, and they aren't exactly that simple to tackle. One of the main factors that naturally causes toxicity is the competitive nature of the games themselves. In this case, Valorant heavily relies on players and a team skill to win, and almost all players play the game to win, obviously. More often than not, teammates will turn on each other when they think that one person isn't pulling their weight or contributing enough to the team. This can create a stressful environment for the players, and some may even turn to toxic behavior as a way to cope with the pressure of competition or to try and to gain an advantage over others. I've even seen cases with people within the same friend group even turn on each other in this case. Even though game developers, including Riot, send out patches to balance out gameplay, it is quite evident that balancing competitive games are almost impossible. So as time passes, with these balancing updates being introduced constantly and causing the game to change for the better, players start to have expectations and tend to grow certain feelings about certain things in the game. These feelings often evolve into frustration and ultimately cause toxicity without the devs or the players even realizing it. League of Legends has been notorious for this, and it seems like Valorant has also caught up with this trend, and this cycle will continue almost indefinitely. On top of this pressure of competition, players are also building expectations as the game sort of develops on and on. League of Legends is actually notorious for this right now because the game is so well established and there's an established way to play. So because of this expectations of how the game should be played, players also have these expectations in their teammates, and this results in this toxicity when these are not met. Valorant, although much newer, is actually starting to hit this point as well, and because of this, these toxic environments are starting to build more and more. Another main driving factor that most online games, including Valorant, have become toxic for is the anonymity the current online gaming trends have. Players feel less accountable for their actions when they are hidden behind a screen, which can and often does lead to harmful behavior. This is a pretty common yet very serious issue that persists on the internet. Users can opt to hide behind aliases or fake personas and bully others without any consequences. And this is something that won't come to a halt anytime soon. Social and psychological factors also contribute to toxicity in online environments. Players who are prone to anxiety, depression, or other mental health issues may be more likely to engage in toxic behavior. Additionally, players who have experienced bullying or harassment in real life may also be more likely to engage in this toxic behavior in online gaming communities. This is not necessarily a simple case either, and the apart from that, other emotions and qualities such as ego or jealousy can be the main driving factors for this behavior. When a person's ego is hurt, they usually tend to validate themselves by insulting or just not playing the game. And finally, the lack of community norms and inadequate moderation are the final pieces of the puzzle. When there are no clear rules in place, players may engage in toxic behavior simply because they don't know that it's unacceptable. The saddest part is that many influencers on the internet promote such behavior to audiences, especially young ones, who then take these unethical practices to their own games and lives. The prime example is Tyler1. The famous League of Legends streamer was also notorious for being extremely toxic, and it is undeniable that he had an impact on influencing his audience to be the same. He has gotten better in recent years, but the issue of influencers promoting toxicity is still a thing, even in VALORANT 2. And most game devs, including Riot, have very good stances against toxicity in their games, but do they actually work? Well, yes, the punishment systems do work as intended, and you could easily get banned temporarily or even permanently for these toxic behaviors, not only in VALORANT, but in League of Legends too. But there are multiple cases of Riot banning the victims instead of the actual toxic culprits, so it is quite hard to take these systems seriously, hoping that they eliminate toxicity altogether. Riot must definitely step up and fix their systems before things get really out of hand and the game eventually dies. As of now, if there are no real consequences for harmful behavior, players may feel free to engage in toxic behavior without fear of punishment. Considering all these facts, it's quite evident that toxicity in online gaming, especially VALORANT right now, is a complex issue with multiple causes. The causing factors differ from player to player, and not everyone is punished for their actions. To reduce toxicity in online gaming communities, it's important for game developers and community moderators to take steps to address these issues. This can include implementing better moderation systems, creating clear community norms, and providing resources for players who may be struggling with mental health issues. Toxicity altogether might not be eradicated 100%, but addressing these underlying causes is essential to reducing toxic behavior in gaming communities and creating a safe and enjoyable environment for all players. As always, hope this video was insightful to you guys, and I will catch you in the next one. Stay fresh.